Hey, welcome back. Team Biden continues to have its eyes on the post-debate polls. And as we mentioned, the polling data this afternoon is not good. New numbers from the New York Times and Siena College show Donald Trump leading Biden by 9 points among registered voters. But perhaps just as concerning for the campaign, 74% of registered voters say President Biden is too old to be an effective president. And that is up 5 points since the debate. Joining me now is the panel. White House correspondent at USA Today, Francesca Chambers, the former mayor of Ithaca, New York, Svante Myrick, and Republican strategist Jim Dornan. Thank you all so much for joining me here on Meet the Press Now. Really appreciate it. Francesca, I want to start with you. It's another day, another round of polls. You know, the Biden campaign tried to pre-butt this New York Times Siena poll by saying, look, it's, it could be an outlier, or listen, our internal polls show that the race hasn't really changed that much. Do you think that these polls will make a difference? Will they cause the dam to break, especially as we were hearing earlier, among members of Congress?
Well, it's not just one poll, though. It wasn't just the New York Times Siena poll. Wall Street Journal. And actually, we had a poll at USA Today that we also dropped this week. Previously, it was 37 in the race. Now Biden's at 38, and Trump was at 41% in our poll. So while that's only a few points and not as far as the New York Times had it, that's edging outside of the margin of error at this point for Joe Biden. Now, in terms of whether, as you said, that would cause the dam to break, what I've been hearing from Biden world, Democrats, White House officials, everyone around him, they think that this is salvageable. They think that he can still do this. You see now what a plan emerging here. Go to Wisconsin, go to Pennsylvania, do an interview, do a press conference. He has NATO next week, an opportunity to be on the world stage as well. And then potentially allies of the White House and Democrats say, then let's have a conversation.
You're on the beat. You see him every day. Does he take enough questions?
I don't think any of us who cover the White House ever think that he takes enough questions. I think we'd like to see him take questions every day, all the time. But, at the press conferences, it is a difficulty when he is not having them that frequently. Then you do wind up in scenarios where when he is on the world stage, he sometimes gets questions about things outside of those issues.
And shouted questions, which sometimes can be tough to hear, in all fairness to him, and he's not in the right place to answer them. So, Svante, I want to turn to you. The Biden campaign is urging their supporters to ignore the polls, and the internal polls, as I mentioned, have a relatively close race. At one point, though, are they asking their supporters to just ignore what they're seeing? I mean, that's what the Trump campaign is saying. Don't believe your lying eyes. Is that going to be effective? Because according to that New York Times Siena College poll, 74% of voters think that the president is too old to effectively govern.
Look, I think the president has an opportunity, and the campaign has an opportunity here in the next week to demonstrate to the American people that they are up for this race and that he is up for another term as president. But I do think it's only about a week, right? I think we have to answer this question pretty soon. And actually, I think it's perfectly normal, in fact, healthy, that a party asks questions. I really am proud of the fact rarely do I love the disarray that comes with being a Democrat. But sometimes you think, okay, well, this is what it's like to not be in a cult, right? We don't believe the same thing on Wednesday as we did on Monday, no matter what happened on Tuesday. We take in new information, we ask questions, and if the president and his campaign can answer them, we will stand strong behind him, as we have.
So that's interesting. In your view, chaos, as so many people are predicting here, might not be the worst thing in the world. It might get people excited about this election, potentially.
Democracy is healthy. Asking questions, getting answers is healthy. And if you just pretend, as I feel, respectfully, and I know you agree, if you pretend, like the Republicans have with Trump, that the emperor, who is walking around naked, is actually, in fact, in a nice bespoke suit, you do a disservice to the party and the country.
But the argument you're making, that the Democrats, might change their minds, but aren't we here because the Democratic Party, wanted to go with President Biden and may have, at least according to the critics, the argument is that they may have swept some of this under the rug beforehand.
Yeah. Well, having never made a mistake before, I don't know what that feels like. But I don't actually think it's a mistake. I think the president has 50 years of public service. To his credit, he's accomplished incredible things, including in the last 3.5 years. You nominate people both on their potential and on their record. And I think it was super fair, not only fair, but well-deserved, to nominate President Biden, given everything he's done for the American people. it's also fair to say, hey, is your age catching up to you? Should we talk about this? Show us, work with us, and we'll see if you're still up for it.
So, Jim, Svante mentioned that he has about a week, maybe we're to figure this out. He has an interview coming up that he's supposed to do on Friday. There's supposedly a press conference that they've scheduled next week during the NATO summit. How critical are these appearances? And if he messes up on either of those two, is this over,
I think we're seeing the beginning and the end right now. I honestly believe. I agree that it's going to take a week. Francesca mentioned the Wall Street Journal poll also had him down 8, I think. And 80% said he shouldn't be running. I just think it's a matter of time. I think that Kamala is getting the troops together, and I think the writing is on the wall. I mean, Gravalia doesn't matter outside the Beltway. He matters inside the House. He's got a powerful voice in there. And I just think the debate was devastating. I mean, it was absolutely devastating. And I just think it's a matter of time now.
What do you make of somebody that has been relatively, actually almost completely silent this week, which is unlike him? Former President Trump has, this disciplined campaign, where did it come from?
I think everybody's as surprised as you are, to be honest with you. But I also think he's finally listened to his advisors. I mean, that campaign wants to run against Joe Biden. And I think somebody probably sat him down and said, listen, you open your mouth, you're going to push him over the edge. Let's keep him there so you can beat him.
And Francesca, how does the Trump campaign potentially run against Vice President Harris? Do you think that, that'd be something that they would welcome, or they prefer to run against President Biden?
Well, right now they're not saying a whole ton about who it could potentially be outside of Joe Biden. And by the way, they seem to want it to continue to be Joe Biden because of the debate performance that Donald Trump had the other night. I wanted to touch on something else you had said before, though. I am hearing from Democrats that they also think that Joe Biden should take more questions, that he should get out there and that he should do press conferences, that he should do events without teleprompters to show that he can do this without being on a teleprompter. They believe he should do town halls where he takes questions from voters. That is what I'm hearing from Democratic National Committee members.
And when you see him in those settings, one-on-one, that's something his campaign says, but, witnessing, he is very good in a one-on-one setting. And, when you talk to him, he can be sharp when he interacts with reporters on a, not outside the White House, with Marine One all loud in the background. Are they keeping him, under wraps here, under bubble wrap?
Yeah, I do think that Joe Biden, look, he's always been a better public servant than a public speaker. Always, since he was 27. And he's been a better president than he was a debater. Right? There are certain things that he has a skill for. He has a humanity, he has a wisdom, he has a grace. And he has a deep connection with legislators that's helped him pass a ton of legislation.
Yep, absolutely.
But they're just afraid that these verbal gaffes will turn people off. I think, if anything, we've learned in the last 8 years, voters are not so particular about the particularities from Trump to Joe Biden.
Right.
They just want to see that you're human, that you're capable, that you're here. And I still believe that that's Joe Biden. I still believe that he can do this job, and I look forward to him proving it to us and to the rest of the country.
Jim, Democratic governors are meeting with President Biden in a few hours. What do you think, how will that meeting look like? What does President Biden have to say to some of those governors, some of whom are, speaking of Gavin Newsom, are discussed as a potential replacement for him? How critical do you think communicating with those governors will be to whether he can, stay in this race through at least the next week?
I think it's the same as the interview on Friday. He's got to be good. He's got to be on target. And he needs message to be heard. But, half of those people in that governor's meeting are talked about as being the next candidate for Democratic president.
A little awkward. All right, we're out of time. Francesca, Jim, Svante, thank you so much for joining us here on the panel. We really appreciate it.